If you've been around the channel for a while, or even if you're new, you probably figured out we like making display boards and dioramas. And this year we decided that we're going to make it bigger, we're going to make better, and you know what? It paid off. Hey everyone, welcome back to Emperor's Hobby. I'm Scott, and we are going to talk about display boards. We always want to talk about display boards. Today is no different. We've been competing in Warhammer tournaments for several years now. Last year, we submitted our Tau diorama, and I posted a video of it, and we missed the mark by 1 point of getting first place for Best Painted Army. Last year, we decided we're going to make a bigger and better display board. We're gonna knock it out of the park and work on winning. Like always, we started out with a sketch of a design, and the whole idea was that I was going to run World Eaters. Now, what are World Eaters? They are a Warhammer 40k faction. This is a Games Workshop product and one of the tabletop strategy games that we like to play. World Eaters are superhuman space marines, and they are agents of chaos. They worship a god named Khorne. Khorne in Warhammer 40k lore is the god of violence, rage, blood. And so we said, why don't we make a cool thing, a display board that is going to be partly like a dungeon, tile floors, you got walls that are just like dark and dingy, maybe they have blood on them, and then you have this complete contrast part of it on the other side that has grass and meadows and peaceful, because that's what the opposite of, what I think of violence and blood and rage and these things that just want to charge into stuff and murder it. So that was our theme. That's what we thought of, and that's what we were working to. However, the Michigan GT, the competition we were just at, they announced earlier in the year that they were going to hold a terrain building competition. Using our design from last year, we decided to expand it. We're going to keep the display board. That's going to be about 15 inches by 22 inches. We are going to expand that to the full size of a standard competitive game table for Warhammer 40k, which is 44 inches by 60 inches. So roughly 4 foot by 5 foot. I thought it would be really cool to be able to cut out part of that thing, about part of the giant display that we're going to do, and make it so we can actually still have a display board that I can carry around with me during the tournament, but be able to slip it in during the painting portion of the competition and pull that out and put in a regular flat piece so that way it could be used at the gaming tables. So that's going to be the idea behind our design. Now, in addition to making the board, we also have to come up with the terrain design. So what we wanted to do is use the concept of warp gate, being able to go from one place instantaneously to another in 40k lore, but also have some of the elements from that be pulled through into the other side. This will help with us blending in things such as the grass and the meadow with the tiles. So the best way to do this is to break it down into pieces. So we're gonna do the same thing we always do. We've come up with our design. We have a general high-level plan. We need to take that plan and narrow it down and start working through each of our challenges before we get started. So our first challenge that we need to solve is the terrain. The tournament itself for the competition, didn't really say, hey, here's exactly what you need to make. They just gave us general guidelines that kind of fit the standard Games Workshop layout. Now, the standard layouts, they prescribe it, and it changes depending on what mission you are playing during the competition. So that means we had to make the thing dynamic. It had to be able to move around. It wasn't just something that we set up that was static. And we're going to do another video that's going to go in depth on what sizes that should be. And more importantly, we're going to share the exact dimensions and actually give you a printable thing that if you wanted to use it, you could, to be able to have the sizes correct so you can make the terrain yourself at home. That's going to be another video, so be on the lookout for that. What we did is we started with making the board itself. Then we took the terrain pieces, which we had plates already to the size that they should be, and laid them out and drew them on the board. That gave us a good idea of where the placement was going to be for these things and how it would work. The second thing we need to figure out is how are we going to lay out the terrain board itself. So where are we going to put our pieces? Now, figuring it out and how we're going to manage that, we came up with a good idea. Now we thought about corner to corner. We thought about maybe doing a third or having like a blend throughout the whole thing. But what we settled on was just simply making it easy. Half and half. Half of the board is going to be that tile dungeon. The other half is going to be the grass and the meadow. Keep it simple, keep it easy, and make it very understandable. So now we're going to be ready for the execution phase of this project. We have things figured out, but there's still a little bit more that we need to sort out. One, what we want to do is be able to slip our display board that we're going to carry around, like I mentioned before. We're going to need to be able to slip that in and out of the table terrain itself. So that means we're also going to have to cut another piece that's going to fit in there. The very next thing we need to do is start diving into the tile portion of this. Now our plan is that we're going to make thin pieces of tile and we're going to lay them out. Now this is not the first time doing tile. We did a little bit of it, just a tiny bit, when we did the tile diorama, which turned out pretty good. So we're going to find out how fun it is to be able to do 44 inches by 30 inches of tile, plus 2 other boards, a couple other pieces of terrain, plus all these bases that we're going to need to do. But one thing at a time, and that means we need to start with actually cutting out all of the tile. This foam cutting tool that I have that works similar to kind of a table saw, or zip through the pieces of foam into a prescribed size. Now, just like all the rest of our tile and foam projects that we've done, we will take a piece of aluminum foil and roll over all of them. That takes an incredible amount of time, but it definitely is worth the results because it looks a lot better. If you've ever done tile in your own house, one of the things you like to do is get your first row set, and then everything builds off of that. So you need that one to be dry and you need it to be set. And then you can add the other rows and pieces onto that. They'll be secure, they won't move, you won't have shift, and it makes everything a lot easier. This is not any different. You want to do the same exact thing. And then we're going to come back and put that tile in. Now this is going to take a couple minutes. I want to thank my daughter for helping me out. She's a champ when it comes to projects like this and doing a lot of these like really repetitive tasks, helping me out. So I definitely appreciate her helping me in these things. All right, now that we've gotten to the portion where the tile is going to be connected to that piece that's going to come out, I think we're going to keep this simple where we just lift up one side of the board, pull that piece out, and then we put the other piece in and drop it. That is going to mean that we're going to want certain pieces of tile to be sticking out and other pieces of tile to be inset. We'll work and make sure that that happens, and we'll have to replicate it for both pieces. We also are going to do the tiles for the terrain. Now I'll get to more about the terrain here in just a minute, but we're going to put some of the tile on the terrain as well. Now that we have all the tile in place, the next thing we want to do is rough it up. Now this is one of the harder parts of any project, is when you have to rough up a project. You have to kind of like intentionally break it. It always makes you nervous. You're like, what if I break it too much? What if I don't? Well, you kind of just have to get over that feeling and take a leap of faith. Trust the process and make it happen. Sand is a really good ground cover piece. It's very easy to color. It has some good texture to it. So we're going to use that and pull it out of our old school playbook here that we've done a few times, as you've seen. And we're going to put down a layer of glue. Then we're going to put down some sand. And then when that finally dries, we're going to put down a final layer of glue over that sand as well. And during this process, we're also putting some glue on the tile. As a reminder, if you spray an aerosol spray onto foam, it's going to melt or start eating away at the foam. And we definitely don't want that to happen with this. Now, before I get too far in it, one of the other things I'm going to do is we're going to make some blood rivers that are going to go through this. So I'm going to actually take this little tiny blowtorch to melt the foam on purpose. And I'm going to do this outside with lots of ventilation, but I'm melt the foam on purpose and kind of create these channels that we're going to pour some resin and have some blood. Next action is going to be to prime this entire thing. Now it's going to take a little bit to do it. You could use an airbrush, you could use a regular brush. Both of those things are going to take way too long for something this big. So we're just going to take some spray can paint that we've got from the hardware store. Luckily, it was on sale / clearance. We got a whole bunch of it, so we're just going to spray this thing and prime the entire thing black. Apply a little bit of gray to give this some contrast, put a mid-tone on there, and then we're going to follow and do the same thing with white as well. and we're going to apply some colors. Now, we were able to get one of these color cubes that everybody's been raving about. You've been seeing them everywhere. And we looked through them and found one that really fits perfectly with what we were thinking. And we're going to use this as part of our palette. Now, this is one of the other nerve-wracking parts of the process. And you've seen me go through this a few times if you've watched other videos. Always makes me nervous because it feels like you're ruining the thing, but you have not. This is where you got to trust the process. So once we've applied all those and put down our marks, we're going to let it dry. Our next step is we put down a homemade wash that we've made. It's got a little bit of brown texture into it. We're just going to put that over everything to help blend and seep into the cracks of everything. Especially helpful with some of the pieces of tile that we've broken. Make sure that wash gets in there to be able to help make those portions a little bit darker. And we're going to let that dry completely. Now our final steps are, well, there's quite a few final steps, but our final steps for at least the tile side is we're going to dry brush everything. And really we're going to dry brush the entire thing. But let's start with the tiles first. So let's dry brush. Remember, you can use a glove and you can test brush on your hands. So that way you don't smear a bunch of color everywhere. We're going to do a couple layers of this on both sides of the fence. On the grass side, we're going to do some browns, and we're going to do some darker brown, some lighter brown, and then we're going to do a white. And the same thing on the right-hand side, we're going to do some gray, and then we're going to do some lighter gray, and then we're going to do some white. So the unifying color is going to be white between the two of these. Now, once everything is dry, we have some more homemade wash that we did, and it's going to be some green, and we're going to put that all over grass side of things. We want some green to go on the bottom. That's going to help smooth over any type of imperfections we get with the flocking. With everything done, we're going to take this thing back down into the studio, and we are going to apply flocking. Now, we have never done this before, but we watched a lot of videos of it. So this is the fun part. We find out, is this going to be harder than we expect or easier than we expect? I guess we'll find out, right? We've got a couple different types of grass. I wanted to have the grass itself be very bright and vibrant, and we don't really want it to be all one color. So my idea behind this is to take the applicator, and we're going to layer in the different kinds of grass. I'm not going to mix them up in the applicator. I'm just going to layer them in, so that way when I'm shaking this thing to have the grass fall out, it actually will mix them together and kind of have a cool blend. I was really surprised. One, when you bought it, you got grass that came with it that you could use, but more importantly, it was only $32, and it's battery powered. The good news is this is appearing to be a lot easier than I was expecting it to be. I think this applicator makes it a lot simpler, a lot easier, and it looks really good. All right, we're going to let the flocking dry, and really something to mention about this is I really like the variation in color. Putting and layering in those colors, and that was definitely a good call. We learned a lot about flocking during this process, so we planned another video that we're going to share with you all here pretty soon. Before we get too far into the terrain piece, we're going to have 4 different pieces that we're going to need to do, basically. One is going to be the wall that goes in the display board portion. That's going to be made out of 3D printed pieces. The second thing that we need to have, closed space. This is one of the pieces that they have on the Games Workshop. The suggested layout that they have is about 2 stories tall if you're to compare it to like a house or a building. And so we're going to need to have that piece. It's a little bit different than the rest. The other thing that we need is an L-shaped piece that kind of has like a shelf on it, meant to be more of like a room type structure. We're going to need the gates that we were talking about. We're going to have to print some of those up. They're going to be 3D printed. And the very last thing is we're going to make a very small L-type shape with no roof piece on the top. Before we get anything too crazy, we want to size out our foam. Now we have all our measurements figured out, and I think I mentioned this already, but we are planning to do an in-depth video about making the terrain, cutting the terrain, and we will share these instructions during that video, along with all the logic and how we figured out the exact measurements. So after figuring out all the terrain measurements, we're going to put those onto the foam, trace out all of our shapes on the board, use a ruler and measure them all out. Actually, we're going to use a T-square technically. We're going to measure those all out, and then I will cut those out with a knife. Now, if I was doing this in a massive scale, I'd probably use that foam cutting device that I had and make it more of an assembly line situation. Now, with all our pieces cut out, we're going to organize them. I was smart enough to label them as I was going, so that made the organization a lot easier. Just kind of calling the terrain pieces ABC. 1, 2, 3, just so I knew what went with what. And so now we're going to work on building them. Now, when we build them, we're going to try to make these straight as flat as possible. We're going to rough them up later to make them look like runes, but let's start with the actual shapes that they need to be in more of a pure form, if you will. Now, the shapes of these things are going to need to be very specific, so different types of L's that are going to be made. You got the thing that looks more like a small U, and then you have the smaller terrain pieces. So we're going to use a hot glue gun to be able to do that. We want to figure out how we're going to put these gates. Now, those 3D printed gates we were talking about, we printed all those up. Let's go ahead and we're just going to assemble all of them right now. And with them assembled, we need to figure out how they're going to fit onto the terrain pieces. Now, what we've really decided, I tried an experiment where I was hoping I could melt these into the foam. Unfortunately, that didn't work. 1, it was really stinky, didn't work. 2, it made the resin really brittle and it started breaking, so that didn't work. Luckily, we printed an extra gate because we broke the first one. What our plan is going to be is we're simply going to cut out a circle and glue the gate into it, kind of push it into the foam a little bit. The other thing that we want to do is we're going to take the wall pieces from the actual display board piece of this, break them up, and inset them into the terrain itself. We want it to look like it's being pulled through from the work gate into the thing. Now, the downside to this is it's taking a lot of time because we're doing a lot of foam manipulation. We're cutting out pieces of foam, we're pulling pieces out. Kind of stinks, it's taking a lot of time, but the effect looks really cool. We had to go back in time. One of the things I would do is slice the models, so the pieces I wanted to inset didn't have to be dug out quite so much, and it would have been incredibly helpful for the gate, because then we could have took the gate and glued it on each side of the foam and made it look like the gate was inset into the middle of the terrain piece. But that's all right. You learn lessons, and the next time, and you think about those things. That's just the way this works. We actually need to put together the display board part. We're going to make that wall, and it's going to kind of be like our piece that draws everything together. I want them to look cool independently, but when you put them next to each other, it builds a story and a picture. So with that done, we're going to follow the same process we did with the other thing. Well, we're going to prime everything black. We're going to put the gray on it. Then we're going to put the white contrast on it. We'll add a little bit of coloring to it. We'll add some wash to it, and we'll do the dry brush. I know. Not very exciting from a repeatability standpoint. However, it does work quite well. Contrast, we use Blood Angels Red and put those on those little tiny pieces. And that should make everything pop. And it really did. The second thing that we need to do is we're going to actually take the gate and we're going to paint that a couple different colors. We're going to have silver, we're going to have black, and we're going to have brass. And while that's happening, we're also going to do the flocking techniques, the same thing that we did before, but we're going to do it on these smaller pieces, and we're going to do the bases of the models themselves. It took us several months to be able to get all of this put together and have it happen. And a lot of it is you hurry up, you do a thing, and you wait. And sometimes that's the nature of these types of projects. All in all, we are extremely happy with the results of how this thing looks and how it is. And of course, I'm happy with winning the terrain building competition at the Michigan GT. That was awesome to be able to hear my name called and say the winner of it was me. Beyond excited, and I got a cool cup to be able to prove it. We are definitely excited if they host the same thing. We can do something even cooler next year. I think this is one of our best boards that we've done so far. I love the contrast and the creativity. I love the way that it looks, and the colors just pop out and draw your attention. Is going to be really fun to play on. We plan on streaming some games here on Twitch, and we'll be playing some 40k games there. So be on the lookout for some of our other videos. As I mentioned, we're going to do a flocking video, a terrain video, and we also are going to do a tile video. There'll probably be a few more things that come from this, but just focusing on those things, some of the techniques and some of the things you can do, and a little more depth of how they work and what challenges we had during this project. If there's some other element of this that you really want to see, or you're curious in how it worked, let us know. We're happy to either answer questions and or make a video about it. Make sure you put those comments down below. Till next time, when we see you at the table.